My experience in journalism started way back in 1981. Immediately I finished my university degree at Makerere University. I was employed with the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. At that time, there was no university that was offering journalism, and it was the only university in Uganda, and that was Makerere University. Journalism was only being offered at diploma level. That was Institute of Public Administration, which is today called Uganda Management Institute. So when we joined Ministry of Information, the ministry had to organize 1 month serious induction training course for the graduates. And after completing that 1 month induction course, a few of us were selected to go for further training in journalism at Entebbe. And it was facilitated by experts from Germany, Berlin Institute of Journalism, former East Germany. We spent 3 months with really intensive training in journalism. And while at Entebbe, we were producing a newspaper by the trainees called Entebbe Times. And after the training, we came back to the station, Ministry of Information, and I started as a news reporter. And this news reporter, first, I was attached to Parliament. In other words, I became a parliamentary reporter. And we were the first people to start the Sunday edition of newspaper. The newspaper that was government owned at that time was Uganda Times. At that time, the edition of newspaper used to stop on Saturdays. There was no edition of any newspaper of Uganda Times on Sunday. So the reporters, journalists who were working for Uganda Times would stop working on Saturday. On a Sunday, they would have a break. But when we came, we started the Sunday edition that became known as Sunday Times. Okay? And today it is now called, is it Sunday Vision? So Sunday Vision owes its origin at that time when we began the Sunday Times. Okay? So I worked for almost 2 years. That was from 1981. Then I shifted almost at the beginning of towards the end of 1982. I came to Radio Newsroom. It was Radio Uganda at that time. And when I joined Newsroom, I also first started as a reporter, before finally I became a news editor. So from 1983, I worked as a news editor up to year 2000. You see, we were really government employees. In other words, we were civil servants. We were employed by government. And therefore the relations with the government was very close, because you are working with somebody who is feeding you. And therefore, you cannot bite the finger that is feeding you. And that means you must act as also other civil servants, because you are also guided by what you call the standing orders. As a civil servant, you are guided by standing orders. So anything that is out of the standing order, that means you are also now, you have to be disciplined. Yeah. You cannot publish anything that is too much, against the government or that is critical of government. Okay? You must toe, okay, the line of government. You must dance to the tune of the government. You see, working as a news editor was something very, very, very challenging. Okay? You don't have that freedom maybe to allow certain stories to be broadcast. And mind you, at that time, that was in 1980s, the Museveni's Bush War had already begun. And any security story that would come, any story that was deemed sensitive, you did not have any freedom to use that information. So the policy was that you would refer that story to be cleared by either the Minister of Information himself or the Permanent Secretary. So, in other words, we became self-censored. There was that self-censorship. So any story you suspect that if you used it, it might cause problem to you, you refer it to the Minister either of Information or the Permanent Secretary for clearance. You will only use it when that story has been cleared. And you can imagine at that time now how long it might take because of bureaucracy. The story might go on the minister's desk or the Permanent Secretary's desk. He might not be there. Okay? So it will wait until the person came back. And that's why at that time, the public was not actually trusting even Radio Uganda. So whenever there was something that happened, the first thing they would rush to was BBC, because BBC would be the first to broadcast it, and then Radio Uganda will broadcast it later. That's why at times the public was now referring us to us that we are broadcasting something very stale. We are broadcasting history, because they would first hear it on BBC, and then Radio Uganda will come and broadcast it at a later stage. Well, as a news editor, there are so many incidences that I experienced. Okay? Because, in journalism, as a news editor, you are the gatekeeper. You are the last person to determine which story should be broadcast or not. As the Bush War of Museveni was raging on, I think that was 1984. I don't know whether government stage managed some kind of, event. They gathered journalists and took them to a place called Kakoge. Eh? No, not Kakoge, Katugo. If some of you travel along Gulu, Kampala Road, there is a place called Katugo. So journalists were taken there to witness. At that time, the Musevenis were being referred to as bandits. That bandits were now beginning to surrender. And some of them had been surrendered, and journalists were taken there to go and talk to them, to see these journalists, these rebels or bandits now surrendering. So we had a reporter for Uganda News Agency, because Uganda had an agency, news agency called Uganda News Agency, UNA. And we used to receive our stories from UNA. In Radio Uganda, we did not have our own news reporters. So this UNA correspondent or UNA reporter came back with the story. And it happened that I was the news editor on duty. It was on a Friday. So when I looked at the story, I edited it. It started running at 8 o'clock in the evening. It was repeated at 10 in the evening. The following day, Saturday at 7 and also at 10 in the morning. And I used to live just nearby because in Ministry of Information had its own small quarters where staff were staying. I was a bachelor at that time. I was not married. So after my duty, I came back to prepare tea. And as tea was boiling on the charcoal stove, I saw one of the presidential press unit girls coming towards me. Then she greeted me. She told me, His Excellency wants to see you. Okay? So I knew it might have been in connection with some of the stories that went on air the previous night and also the following morning. So I said, fine, let's go. I went to the newsroom, picked all the original copies of the stories I edited and the edited version that was read, okay, for all those times. A car was waiting for us at the ministry parking yard. Now, today is a Pearl of Africa. That used to be where Ministry of Information headquarters was. Pearl of Africa Hotel, Nakasero. So we entered the vehicle and we were driven to Nile Mansion. At that time it was called Nile Mansion. Today it is called Serena Hotel. So we climbed the third floor and we were put aside in one of the side rooms, waiting for the president to come. That was around 11 o'clock. Waited for 2 hours, then finally the president comes in around 1 o'clock. I was seated just at the entrance. Okay? And as he enters, he grabs these papers from my hand, tells me, you people of information, you are misinforming the public. You say peace has returned to Luero when people are still dying. So he sat down. That was Milton Obote himself. He sat down. He started reading through, okay, each story one by one. He did not find what he had thought or what he had imagined, that peace has returned to Luero. He said, no, I don't see this information here. But I thought I heard that peace has returned to Luero. But there is nothing here. But still, I want you to go and rewrite this story. And it should start from 5 o'clock. Okay? So the head of the presidential press unit, we are together with them, and also the director of Uganda News Agency was also around. So when he dismissed us, we drove up to Nakasero. Then I rewrote the story. It started running from 5, 8, 10, then 7 the following morning, and then 10 o'clock. That's when I dropped the story. And I thought I would be called again. Since then, I'm still waiting to be called again to go and explain to the president why I used that story. Okay? So that was my experience, face to face with the president, although being a government employee. What he was actually imagining was he had seen a caption on Uganda television that peace has returned to Lweru. And he thought it was on Radio Uganda. I said, no. So we proved that. And I came out clean.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
What's your view on the current relations between the government and the media?
Well, the current relations here, I think the relation is not all that very, very friendly. Okay?
Why?
Why? On quite a number of occasions, journalists have been beaten up by security operatives while on their official duty. You must remember, the public has the right to information. And journalists, okay, are the brokers of information. They are not telling, they are not giving false information. For example, with the video, if people are rioting and they are being beaten, that's exactly what the journalist is interested in. And because of this, it has actually brought bad blood between the government and, of course, journalists. But, of course, not the one of the journalist working for UBC. UBC is also a government mouthpiece, although it is supposed to be a public corporation. So UBC is not really generating its own fund, or is not funding itself, but it is being funded by government. And that makes it all the reason why it is a government mouthpiece. So if you are now working also for UBC, definitely you are also going to be treated like a government employee, and therefore you don't have any freedom. So the journalists who might be having bad blood with government are these private journalists. Okay? These are the ones who has got now very bad relations with government. Okay? But also, not all private, say, media organizations have bad blood with government. Even some of the private media are also, I can say, also promoters of the opposition. They could also be the mouthpiece of the opposition. Okay? That one is a fact. And this brings a lot of now confusion. Okay? So the government identify you to be an opposition also mouthpiece. And that is what is creating bad relations with the government. The current media, in fact, is very vibrant, I can say. Okay? Uganda's media is now very, very vibrant. Why? They are really acting as a proper watchdog. And it is putting government on its tenterhooks. Okay? So whatever is happening in any part of Uganda, you'll see it either on radio or TV, and more so now with the modern technology, social media. Okay? So social media has become more and more vibrant. Okay? So when we are talking of media, we are not necessarily only talking of this traditional media, radio, TV, or newspaper. We are also talking of the web. Okay? And I think it is now the web that is creating more animosity between the media and the government. Remember, the web or the internet or online journalism now has no control, as opposed to traditional media, where a story must go through those gatekeepers. What is posted on the internet, anybody is actually a blogger, so you can post anything. And I think that is what is really annoying government, because at times some of the stories are not verified, they are not substantiated, okay? At times they just post any story that is likely to breach peace in the community, that is likely to stir some kind of riot in the community, something the government does not want. Okay? I think one way of improving relations between the media and government is to hold some regular kind of meetings with the government officials. Okay? There should be a collaboration between the government and the media. And also the second thing is for the media houses to train or to recruit well-trained personnel. You see, most media houses, especially radio, some of the people working for these radio stations are handpicked. People without any experience, people without any ethics, and so on and so forth. So the owners of these media houses really need to do a lot to train its own staff. And having trained them, they also need to remunerate them properly, give them proper pay. The problem here with our media is that, especially the media, the owners of the media houses, tomorrow you graduate from maybe Uganda Christian University in mass communication, you may be employed, your salary might be about 200,000 shillings. Or you are employed as a part-timer or a freelance journalist, where you will be paid only per story used. Okay? So this is a big challenge even to the media practitioners themselves. You're not being paid well, so why do you have to put a lot of effort? Okay? Why do you? So unless this is addressed, we shall continue to have half-baked journalists who will also continue to report unethically. And when you report unethically, definitely you are creating also bad relations with the government. The government will not be happy with what you are reporting. So that is one thing that you need to clearly understand. And also the government should not take journalists as their enemies. Government should take journalists as partners in development. Okay? Because without journalists, some of the information or some of the things that are happening in the country, government may not be aware. So it is the journalists who will be the first people to come up with this information and bring it to the notice of the government. At times the journalists also alert the government of what is likely to happen. And for this matter, the government should not treat journalists as its enemies, but partners in development. Okay? That means creating good relations with the media. Okay? If the media is going wrong, organize a dialogue with the media. Say, this is where you are going wrong. Okay? And the media also should not act or should not see government as its enemy. Okay? The media should also see government as its partner in development. The two should be seen to work together. not to see each other as enemies. No. Okay? There is freedom of the press. And the media or the journalists should not take that as something that they are free to do anything. Even in those developed countries, you need to work within the law of your country. So similarly, the media in Uganda must also be seen to work within the law of Uganda. You don't go beyond the law. And if you go beyond the law, then the law will have to take its course. Nobody is above the law, including journalists. Okay? So that is, and also government goes also beyond when it is dealing with journalists by brutally suppressing the journalists. And yet the journalists are doing the right thing. Okay? They want the public to be informed. Okay? An uninformed public is also very difficult to rule or to govern. People need information. And journalists are indeed, as I said, brokers of that information.